so I can share it with. That's what I wanted to hear. So without further ado, it's a real pleasure to introduce you to our first speaker, Professor Christine Moffatt. Christine is a professor of clinical nursing research at the University of Nottingham School of Health Sciences. She's also a nurse consultant at the Royal Derby Foundation NHS Trust Lymphoedema Service, in which she leads a research team as well as undertaking a clinical consultancy role. Christine was awarded a CBE in 2006, New Year's Honours List, and made a Life Fellow of the Royal College of Nursing the same year. And what a year that was. She's currently running the Lymphoedema Framework Project in partnership with the BLS and the LSN, which Karen joins us from this evening, and the primary care trusts throughout the UK. So please show your appreciation for Professor Christine Moffatt.
Well, good evening, everybody. Matt, thank you for your kind words. There's a first for everything, isn't there? I have never in my life done a before dinner or after dinner speech. I don't have any jokes. So I'm really sorry. What I am, though, is delighted, honoured to be here. Passionate about lymphedema, as I know every one of you are, and passionate about changing the landscape for people suffering with the condition. So I'm really honoured. I'm so honoured as well to be speaking with my two friends, Vaughan and Denise. Vaughan and I were in Turkey last week at another conference, and of course to be with many of you who I recognise. Well, I got a big shock this morning, and the shock was Matt said no slides. Well, I nearly fell off the chair. I'm very happy to know that Dr. Keeley also nearly fell off the chair because, of course, we're used to having slides. So we're used to having prompts. So I've got my piece of. But I'm really, really honoured to be here. I developed my passion for lymphedema at St George's Hospital in London, where I was a leg ulcer specialist working with Peter Mortimer, a name you don't need to have any introduction to. I was a leg ulcer specialist, and in my leg ulcer clinic, lots of patients started to come in with lymphedema. I said to Peter one day, why am I seeing all these patients? He said, because our waiting list is so long. And that's when I started to get interested. I met the lovely LSN and had a project with them, and worked for 23 years in George's, and then wonderful time, actually not working now directly with Vaughan, but a fantastic time working with Vaughan. And I worked still clinically in Denmark. So my husband, this is my lovely husband here, who doesn't know anything about lymphedema, but he's my wonderful So I was asked to talk about what is lymphedema. Well, where do you begin? Because all of you know in this room what lymphedema is. So I decided to look at it, I hope, from a number of angles. I'm really privileged these days to be able to travel around the world and to be able to see lymphedema in some of the poorest places that you could ever imagine. So I really want to talk to you a little bit about what I've seen, to try and be true to what I've heard as well, and doing research, the voice of the patient. Of course, I'm not a patient, not with lymphedema anyway, but to highlight the beginning of this wonderful event, why we should be concerned and why we need to be raising money for it. So, well, what is lymphedema? What's in a definition? This was the conversation I had with Dr. Keeley many years ago when we wrote our first paper, which is, what is lymphedema and is it the right term? Because lymphedema means different things to different people. So in the UK, we talk about primary lymphedema. That's primary lymphedema caused because the lymphatics have not been developed properly in utero. Okay, that's a very small slice of the pot. And secondary lymphedema, well, that's everybody else. And when I started to get involved in lymphedema, it was the era, Karen, you remember this, where the only lymphedema services, Vaughan, you remember it, were services based in palliative care, because the belief at that time was you had to have cancer to have lymphedema. And of course, it still remains a very, very important issue in causing lymphedema, but we know it's much bigger than that. So we began to think, actually it was in 2003 when we published the first paper with a new term called chronic edema. and everybody expected to be kind of annihilated for the daring to think differently. And it isn't because this is a diagnosis, it's because actually, do you know, so many different groups of people have got chronic swelling. And chronic edema is a public health term, but it means everybody can come under that. And as we've done Lymprint, which is our epidemiology study, we've done it in all sorts of places. We've done it in prisons, actually. We've done it in Nottingham Prison. Actually, we did a study in Nottingham Prison. We've done it in nursing homes. We've done it in social care. We've done it in acute hospitals. And what we find is there are people with chronic swelling everywhere, and they're hidden. And I've got a challenge for you. Matt, am I allowed a challenge? Matt, a challenge. This is a very sexist request, but who does the shopping for food in your family? Okay, I'm glad to see that distribution. I'm glad it's or online. I'm very happy about that because I'm married to a man who does the shopping and who's now actually fulfilling my challenge. Go around the next time you're in a supermarket and look at people's legs. Do it very discreetly, please. How many people do you see who are walking around with their shoes overhanging and you think, has nobody ever given them any advice or help? And they've got severe lymphedema and no one's got a diagnosis. We've got the lovely LSN here who's done such fantastic work with GPs trying to highlight this. So this is a problem that's everywhere. And I can tell you from the snippets of our research, which we've done now in 14 countries, really exciting, 41 sites, 60% of people who live at home with home nursing have got chronic swelling, and 70% of them have a leg ulcer that hasn't healed in 5 years. This work was done in the area of Nottingham and Leicester. We find about 30% of people who are in hospital, not because they got lymphedema, when you go and look at them, they've also got chronic swelling, but they might in because they've got appendicitis and they're not diagnosed and they don't know that they've got a problem. And we've learned a lot more from all of our countries about how common it is. If you go to Japan, you find a different profile because you don't find it so common in a general hospital. It's only about 5%. If you go into their elderly care hospitals, 60% of people have got chronic edema and are living with that long term. So part of my vision and the work of ILF is to try and dispel this myth that it's rare, not rare. It's common. It's as common as MS. It's as common as, you know, it's really common. And that means it should have the resource that goes with it. It doesn't, but it should. We shouldn't be in the postcode lottery in the UK for getting services, should we? And yet that's the reality of what we're dealing with. But it also depends where you are in the world. So if we're all sitting here in Africa or India, we wouldn't, if we're talking about lymphedema, we wouldn't be thinking about the kind of lymphedema that you and I have been just talking about. We've been talking about lymphatic filariasis caused by the mosquito. And that's the biggest healthcare problem that causes lymphedema in the world. And, you know, that's what the WHO talk about. When they talk about lymphedema, they don't talk about our problems. They talk about lymphatic filariasis. And it's all solved because they've got magic drugs that the drug companies have given, and everybody in India and Africa has taken them, and we've eliminated the problem. Not true. Because for a start, not everybody in these countries has got lymphedema due to the mosquito. What about all the ones who've had cancer or got primary lymphedema or have all the problems that we see in countries like UK? And Vaughan, I know you've been to see Dr. Narahari, and you will endorse with me that there are, of course, all sorts of patients. And in these countries, there's nothing, there's no diagnosis, there's absolutely nothing. So where you live in the world matters. I should be careful because this is being recorded, but shall we say I went to quite an important meeting in quite a high place in the UK. And at that particular meeting, a statement that was made by someone quite important, very important, that actually lymphedema was going to be eliminated. Because, you know why? Well, we've solved breast cancer treatment and now the sentinel node biopsy means no one's going to get lymphedema. Well, there was a lot of very excited people in the audience who jumped up and down and said, well, for a start, that's wrong. So actually these things really, really matter. And we need to think about lymphedema as a neglected global health problem. And it is hidden. You know, it's like an octopus everywhere but nowhere. It's hidden because actually people are not seeing it, they're not diagnosing it, they're not being trained in it. And what we believe about the condition is also important. So we live in the West, don't we? So we're immersed in evidence-based medicine. We should be immersed in it. But what about if you go to places like Africa and India and you ask people with a condition, what's causing your problem? Do they tell you it's the problem with their circulation? Not at all. They tell you it's witchcraft. We've been bewitched. And they go to traditional healers and they go to shaman to get it. And that is today. This is in Uganda and Africa today. That is the belief system. So of course, our medicine that we come along with our pills that make them ill and make them have to sit in the bathroom for 24 hours, what do they see that as? Well, that's what they bring from these countries and they give to us and they make us even more ill. So they have a very different world. They have even different words for it. And they're very afraid and they're very resistant because of the systems of belief that they have. And actually, who's really caring about lymphedema across the world? Why are we having to sit here today and try to get lymphedema more publicity? Why? Because it's still a very underrepresented issue, despite the work of wonderful societies like the LSN, like the BLS. And we've got a constant fight really on our heads to do that. Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about what I've learned from patients about what it's like. And I feel quite humble. Please, I may get it wrong, because I know there are many of you who are people living with lymphedema. So forgive me if the story I tell you doesn't resonate with you, but I'm trying to be true to what I've heard. And I've heard of the insidious journey that some patients have. The insidiousness of the way they're treated by professionals. Just go away. You're just overweight. There's nothing wrong with you. Go take your diuretics. And the feelings often that they're made to feel insignificant and they're dismissed. Misdiagnosis by professionals is still a massive problem across the world. We are very lucky in this country to have St. George's and to have Dr. Keeley's centres as 2 reference centres. But in the world at the moment, and I'm not talking about poor countries, many countries do not have a single lymphology centre, not one. Imagine that. You know, we're having people come to us saying, can we come and get a diagnosis somewhere? Because there's nothing. And that's in today in high-income countries. So you have the issues that for many patients, they feel missed, they feel that they're dismissed. And then the other story, and I know this resonates with some of you, that your journey into lymphedema is anything but insidious. It's abrupt. It's terrifying. It may be that you end up in hospital in intensive care with a cellulitis, because that can be the other angle to having lymphedema developing. And suddenly you find yourself facing a medical crisis. How terrifying that is. And how scary is it to end up in a hospital where you absolutely know they don't know what they're doing. And you end up being pushed around to different specialties on the wrong antibiotics, or being told, you know, you've got some diagnosis that you don't have. And this is really, really impactful on people. And the work that I've done with children and families has shown that in children with lymphedema, and this is a rare disease, 36% of children have had a cellulitis, 24% by the age of 10. You imagine being a parent and your child is then rushed into hospital and nobody knows what's happening. So for me, I am passionately concerned about representing the voice of patients, as I know societies like the LSN are equally, because people are around the world trying to make sense of something. And the social media world we're in is wonderful, but it's blooming scary. You go on the social media and you think you've got cancer because the word lymphoma pops up. Or you see a stage 5 filariasis from India, and you imagine, what does that mean? So we've got a lot of challenges, which is why charities like ILF, like BLS, like LSN, like the work that Matt's doing, is trying to give us correct information so that people aren't on this awful journey of fear and getting the wrong information. And, you know, it really saddens me that even today, I've been working in Bulgaria. Actually, Bulgaria is on a medium to high income country. But yet, when I was set up the Bulgarian lymphedema framework, I was brought over by the most wonderful group of patients. There was not one doctor interested in the country. And they had learned by buying books, by buying their garments and their materials on Amazon and teaching themselves how to look after themselves, because there was not one doctor in the whole country that was interested. So, you know, we've got a big journey, which is why my journey moved from UK to a broader perspective, because other people were coming and saying, can't we do this together and get to people better than just considering ourselves in our little isolated island when the rest of the world is probably facing the same things. So people living with lymphedema, they're trying to make sense of an altered body, aren't they? They're facing a world which values beauty and it values being young. It does not value being different, whatever the media tells you. And so the stories in the research tell us of hiding away, of the difficulties of even going swimming, that really poignant things that really touch at the very heart of what it means to be someone suffering with this. And then you have the search for getting to the right professional. You know, when we did the first research in UK, on an average, children were waiting 5 years to get to St George's, not because St George's, there was a waiting list at St George's, but because they circumvented all around different professionals. And that first research, there were parents told that they should have had an abortion when the child was found on ultrasound to have lymphedema. They were told to have their toes broken because the swelling was due to an orthopedic abnormality. And they talk of the relief of reaching an expert centre. And that really, really is important. And reaching an expert centre is so critical, but then it's also about how do you live your life every day when you might live 200 miles away from the expert centre. So it isn't enough to just have specialist centres that are miles away. We've got to have care as well that's available locally. And then, I mean, it's wonderful to have you as suppliers. I don't know how many of you know the story of the drug tariff introduction of lymphedema. I'm going to tell it anyway. And Matt, I know you're looking at me. She's thinking she's talking too much. My husband's looking at me as well. But when we were working on our first project, it was a partnership project with the LSN and with St George's. And the initiative was firstly to set up a best practice document, but secondly, to try and get onto prescription lymphedema garments and lymphedema bandages. At that time, there was nothing. So if you weren't lucky enough to go to Dr. Keeley or go to St George's or at the Marsden, forget it, you didn't have anything. And we spent ages trying to work out how do we get it on drug tariff. We gave them the evidence, we talked to people, etc., etc. We got absolutely nowhere. And in the end, I think someone was so fed up with me ringing them up. There was a new person at the drug tariff. So she was very new and she wanted to put a mark on the world. We're coming up to an election, you know what I mean? So she said, oh, well, all right, I'll see you if I have to. Those were her words. But you have to bring somebody who's a distributor, who's from one of the companies. You have to bring them. And I'll see you at the end of the day. So fine. So we went to this meeting somewhere up in Kensington. It was from somebody from BSN at that time, but that was it, you know, they were the representative. And she came out, she said, well, what is this lymphedema thing? So we tried to explain, and we used the word inequity. That was it. Inequity, she said, right, you tell me what you want because I want something to be remembered by. So you tell me what you want in this new drug tariff classification, and I'll get it on. And believe me, the next month it was. It's nothing to do with the evidence, nothing to do with all the lobbying, simply to do with reaching somebody who happened to actually want their name remembered. I'm sure it's brought great things with it and many challenges as well. But that's good, isn't it, when you start to get policy change. And why do we strain? I want to just finish by thinking about why are we struggling? Why is it lymphedema isn't on everybody's roadmap? Because it's the thing I talk about all the time. Why isn't it on everybody's agenda? Well, I engaged with some wonderful sociologists at Nottingham, and I asked them this very question: can you help me make sense why we struggle so much? So they helped us to do some work looking at it from a sociological perspective. And what they showed us was that it's not a sexy subject. Actually, it's not something that's very attractive to medical physicians if they want to make a name, with the exception of the wonderful ones in this room, Alex and George's. It isn't there. So it doesn't have what we call scientific capital. If you want to be famous, you go into neuro or A&E or somewhere where you can make a big name for yourself. You don't go into lymphedema. So that was one of the things. So it's not interesting. Therefore, if it's not interesting, well, who pays attention? Then you have the issues about definition. Well, what is it? We don't know what we're dealing with. And we have the issue of nobody owning it. I've had so many conversations with Vaughan about this. And then, we have so many lack of specialist centres that are interdisciplinary. Why? Because it isn't yet really getting the prominence as a specialty, which it should have, where you've got everybody working together. And when you ask something that's not very interesting, is there any investment potential? I have to be careful here because I know how much the industry have invested. But they've also told me that it's pretty hard sometimes to invest in this area. Even though we are talking about, multi-billion opportunities, it's still tough, isn't it, to invest in this area? And then we're still fighting, and we just come back from a conference. What's the best way to diagnose it? How do you do it? What technique? What's the best compression? We still have so many questions that we don't know. We don't have good answers about. And wonderful to have Denise coming, because actually we're moving into the era of self-management. And the world's changing. What was 30 years ago is different now, and what patients want is different. So all of these things are really, really, really important. So all of these things are what underpin me personally, and why I try to keep going as chair of the ILF, because I really want to put this on the map. I want this to be something when I die, actually, we are now talking about it more, and not my work, but our work together. And I think it is changing. It definitely is changing. But we've got a long, long way still to go about that. I would like my parting message to say to the WHO and all the other people who sit on the sidelines that lymphedema is a truly neglected global disease that requires the same prominence as cancer, as Parkinson's, of all the other conditions. It needs that prominence. And the thing as a clinician that for me is important is, we can still do so much. Even if people come and they're really got quite advanced lymphedema, so much can be achieved. This idea in the literature of irreversibility, which means, in other words, you get to a point there's nothing can be done, rubbish. It's not true. Even people who've been neglected, you can get the right treatment and it can make a difference, and it makes a difference to people's quality of life. And what I believe in is about partnership. We're all individuals in a big world, aren't we? If we join together and coalesce and work in collaboration as much as we can, yes, celebrating diversity, but that collaboration is what underpins ILF, is that strength of partnership, is the ability together to raise the agenda and get people to really deal with this. So I know we're here to get money. And what could be a better cause than the research fund at St George's? I know that whatever money is raised is going to be used in the very best way, in whatever way it's used, it's going to make a difference to life. And finally, I want to pay tribute to Matt. I've been working with Matt. I've been aware and working with Matt over the last few years, and you're a person living with lymphedema, but you are far more than that. You're an ambassador. And you're an example to other people that you can live well and successfully, and you're our champion. So please, you know, let's put our hands together for that.
Thank you so much, but that was not part of the script at all. And thank you.